Original post in our wedding night. I discovered a shocking truth about my husband. He needed his mother's presence during our first night together. I'm still trying to process everything that happened on our wedding night. What was supposed to be one of the most romantic and intimate nights of our lives turned into something I never expected, and honestly, it's left me confused and hurt. I need to get this off my chest and hopefully get some advice or perspective from people who might have been through something similar. A little background first. My husband and I met about 3 years ago through mutual friends. Things progressed quickly but naturally. We connected on so many levels and shared similar values and dreams. I always thought he was independent, confident, and ready for a mature relationship. Over time, we talked about marriage and future plans, and everything seemed perfect. When he proposed last year, I was ecstatic and never imagined there would be any weirdness once we tied the knot. Our wedding day was beautiful, a small ceremony with close family and friends. The atmosphere was filled with joy, laughter, and hope for our new life together. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and nerves, imagining how our first night would be full of love and closeness. I'd pictured us finally relaxing together, just the two of us, celebrating our commitment, but that night didn't go as I expected. After the reception, we checked into the hotel room, and I thought we'd have some private time to ourselves. I was nervous, but excited. However, almost immediately, I noticed my husband acting strangely fidgety, distracted, and barely engaging with me. At first, I thought maybe he was just tired or overwhelmed by the day's events. But then I saw him on his phone, texting and calling his mother repeatedly. I tried not to jump to conclusions and didn't want to seem jealous or paranoid, so I kept quiet. Then, to my shock, he told me his mother would be joining us for the night. I was speechless. I couldn't believe what I just heard. I asked why, and he gave a vague explanation about cultural traditions, something about he couldn't do this without her there, and that she needed to guide him through the first night. He said it like it was normal and expected. But to me, it felt like a violation of privacy and intimacy. Before I knew it, his mother arrived and stayed in the room the entire night. She even slept in a chair near our bed. I tried to stay calm and not make a scene, but inside I was hurting and confused. How could my husband need his mother present for something so personal? Why couldn't he just be there with me alone? I kept thinking about what this meant. Was he not ready for marriage? Was he emotionally stunted or overly dependent on his mother? Was I missing some cultural context here? It felt wrong and uncomfortable on so many levels. I love my husband, but that night shook my faith in what I thought we had. I felt embarrassed and betrayed, like I wasn't enough for him. I wanted our first night to be about us, not about him needing his mother like a child. I don't know how to bring this up again without hurting his feelings or causing conflict, but I also can't pretend everything is fine. Has anyone else experienced something like this? How did you handle it? Is this some kind of cultural tradition I'm misunderstanding, or is it a serious red flag about his independence and emotional maturity? I'm honestly torn and don't know what to think or do next. Update 1. Trying to understand, but feeling lost. Day after our wedding night felt surreal. I was still reeling from the shock of my husband needing his mother there with us on such an intimate night. I wasn't sure how to bring it up without sounding accusatory or hurting him, but I knew I couldn't just bottle everything inside. So, the morning after, I finally asked him again gently why exactly he felt his mother had to be there with us that night. His answer wasn't what I expected. He told me it was a cultural tradition from his family. In his upbringing, the first night after marriage is a moment of transition and anxiety for the groom, and having the mother close by was considered normal to support him. He said it wasn't about me, or about him doubting me, but about him needing emotional reassurance because he grew up very close to his mother and had never really been alone in those kinds of intimate situations. He even mentioned some emotional difficulties he had as a child. His parents divorced when he was young, and his mother became his main source of stability. Apparently, he developed a deep emotional dependence on her as a result. He tried to explain that it wasn't something he had fully dealt with yet. At first, I appreciated his honesty. But as I listened, I realized this wasn't just a one-time tradition. It felt like a deeper problem. I expressed my discomfort and told him how it made me feel embarrassed, hurt, and confused. I said I needed space and privacy as a couple, especially after the wedding, to start our life together. I told him this wasn't just about the first night, but about boundaries and respect moving forward. He promised to try, but honestly, he didn't seem to fully get why it was a problem. He kept saying it was normal for him, and he couldn't just switch off this relationship with his mom. I felt like my feelings were being brushed aside in favor of his comfort. I was caught between wanting to be supportive and feeling like my needs weren't being taken seriously, feeling overwhelmed. I reached out to some close friends and family to vent and seek advice. The responses I got were all over the place. Some said what happened was definitely not normal or healthy. One friend called it a major red flag and warned me I might be marrying someone who's emotionally stuck in the past. Others told me to try to be patient and consider cultural differences before judging. A few suggested that maybe counseling could help us both. One family member, who knew my husband's mother, even confronted him directly after hearing from me. She told him gently but firmly that his dependence on his mother had to change now that he was married, and that I needed to be his priority. He took that seriously and seemed to reflect on it for a while, but even with those conversations, I couldn't shake the confusion and frustration inside me. At times, he showed genuine love and tried to reassure me, bringing me breakfast, apologizing for making me uncomfortable, and telling me he wanted to grow with me. But the dependence on his mother lingered like a shadow. There were small moments when I saw how much he struggled when he got anxious and needed his mom's advice for even simple things, or when he called her late at night for emotional support. I began to wonder if I had ignored warning signs before marriage, blinded by love and hope. Was I too quick to say yes without fully knowing who he was beneath the surface? I started thinking seriously about couples counseling, but part of me hesitated. I worried if he would agree, or if it would even help. I'm stuck between two choices: try to accept this dependence as part of who he is, or push for change that might cause tension, but is necessary for our marriage to grow. Has anyone else been in this situation? How did you deal with a spouse who struggles with emotional independence? Is this just a phase, or does it signal deeper problems we need to confront? I'm scared and confused, but I want to do what's right for him, for me, and for our future. Update to trying to fix it, but the past keeps pulling us back. After the overwhelming shock and confusion of my wedding night and the days that followed, my husband and I finally agreed to try therapy. I realized that if we were going to build a life together, we needed professional help to navigate his emotional dependence on his mother and how it was impacting our marriage. Our first few therapy sessions were a mix of hope and frustration. The therapist encouraged him to open up about his childhood, and slowly, he began to share parts of his past that I hadn't fully known before. He talked about how his parents divorced when he was very young and how his mother became his entire world. She was both his caregiver and emotional anchor, the person who protected him from the instability and uncertainty that came with their fractured family. Because of this, he never really developed the kind of independence I took for granted. He admitted that, even now, as an adult, he struggled with anxiety and self-doubt when his mother wasn't nearby. The first night of our marriage triggered all those old feelings of insecurity, and he felt like he couldn't handle the transition without her presence. Hearing this gave me more compassion for him, but it didn't magically fix the problem. We tried communication exercises at home, like setting small boundaries and practicing saying no when one of us felt uncomfortable. I asked him to try spending more time alone with me, without calling or texting his mom constantly. Sometimes it went well. There were moments when he held my hand, looked me in the eyes, and told me he was trying. I saw glimpses of the man I fell in love with, stronger, more present, and more focused on us, but his mother's role in our marriage became more complicated as time went on. She was sweet and caring on the surface, but overbearing in ways I hadn't anticipated. She would call or text multiple times a day, asking about my husband's mood, his schedule, and sometimes even mine. She'd drop by unannounced or offer unsolicited advice about everything from how I cooked dinner to how he should handle stress. I tried to set boundaries, explaining that we were married now and needed space to grow independently, but it often felt like my husband was caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his mom and his commitment to me. There were times when his mother's involvement made me feel invisible, like I was an outsider in my own marriage. Despite all the therapy and hard work, old habits kept resurfacing. During stressful or emotional moments, my husband would retreat into the comfort of his mother's presence or advice, shutting me out. Sometimes he lashed out when I tried to confront him about this, accusing me of not understanding his background or being unfair. Other times, He'd withdraw completely silent, distant, leaving me to guess what he was feeling. The emotional exhaustion from these cycles was crushing. I loved him, and I wanted to support him, but I felt like I was constantly fighting to be heard and respected. I started doubting if I could sustain this relationship long term. Was love enough to overcome such deep emotional dependency? Was I asking for too much when I wanted my husband to be an independent partner? The turning point came during a heated argument one evening. I had planned a quiet dinner at home, hoping to reconnect and discuss ways to improve our relationship. Instead, it spiraled into accusations, tears, and shouting. I told him I couldn't live in the shadow of his mother anymore, that I needed him fully present as my husband, not as her son. He responded with anger and hurt, saying I didn't understand his struggles and that I was trying to change who he was at his core. After that night, we took some time apart to reflect. I realized I needed to set firm boundaries not just with my husband, but with his mother too. And I had to decide if I was willing to continue trying or if I needed to walk away from my own well-being. So, Reddit, I'm turning to you because I feel lost. How do you deal with a spouse who struggles with independence like this? Can love really overcome such deep emotional dependencies? Has anyone here been through this and found a way to make it work? Or should I start preparing myself for the possibility that this might be too much for me to handle? Final update. Finding my path forward after months of struggle, therapy, and heart-to-heart conversations, I finally made a decision about my marriage. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this journey has been, but I had to choose what was healthiest for me, emotionally and mentally. At first, I desperately wanted us to work. I believed love could overcome his dependence on his mother, and I was willing to be patient. We continued therapy, and slowly, my husband made some progress. He started setting boundaries with his mom, limiting her calls and visits, and learning to handle stress without immediately leaning on her. It wasn't perfect, and the old patterns sometimes crept back in, but overall, I saw growth. His mother also respected our space more after a few firm conversations. She realized she couldn't be the third wheel in our marriage and began stepping back. That shift made a huge difference, but despite the progress, I realized I also needed to focus on my own well-being. I worked on building my confidence, setting clearer boundaries, and rediscovering what made me happy outside the relationship. I started hobbies I'd neglected, reconnected with friends, and even joined a support group for partners of emotionally dependent spouses. These steps gave me strength and clarity. There were still tough days, moments of doubt, frustration, and sadness, but I learned that it's okay to feel all those emotions and still choose to move forward with self-respect. For those who might be in a similar situation, here's what I've learned. Boundaries are essential. Without them, love can become codependency or resentment. Emotional dependencies can be deep-rooted and complicated, often tied to childhood or trauma. Patience helps, but it's not a free pass to ignore your partner's needs. Communication and therapy are powerful tools, but both partners must be willing to change and grow. Never lose sight of your own identity and well-being. You deserve respect and space to thrive. It's okay to walk away if the relationship harms your mental health or self-worth. Sometimes love isn't enough. Today, I feel hopeful and empowered. Whether our marriage lasts or not, I'm committed to loving myself and building a life where I feel valued and whole. To the Reddit community, what's your experience with tough emotional dependencies in marriage? How do you balance love with self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts and advice.